All right, let's talk about jazz, but let's zoom in on an instrument that's the absolute soul of the rhythm section. You might not always see it front and center, but you definitely feel it. We're talking about the double bass, that giant wooden instrument that is, truly, the heartbeat of the music.
I mean, have you ever really thought about what gives jazz that feeling? You know, the one that gets your foot tapping without you even realizing it? Well, a huge piece of that puzzle is the deep, rhythmic pulse coming from the double bass. So let's dive in and see how it all got started.
All right, section 1. From tuba to bass, the original rhythm swap. Now this might surprise you, but way back in the early days of jazz in New Orleans, the bass part wasn't played on a bass at all. Nope, the instrument holding down the low end was actually the tuba. So why the big switch? Well, it's pretty cool when you think about it. Tubas are loud and brassy, which makes them perfect for marching bands and street parades. But as jazz started to move indoors into dance halls and clubs, that big, heavy sound was just a little much. Musicians needed something a little smoother, you know? That's where the double bass came in. With its warm, woody tone, it had a more subtle vibe that could really swing. It was perfect for dancing, and honestly, this one change was a total game changer for the sound of jazz.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty. Section 2, Anatomy of a Giant. What makes this thing work?
So the first thing you notice is it's huge. A full-size double bass stands around 6 feet tall. That makes it the biggest and lowest pitched string instrument in a standard jazz band. I mean, players literally have to stand up or sit on a really tall stool just to play the thing. The magic of its sound really comes from these key parts. That big, hollow wooden body acts like a natural amplifier, making the sound full and resonant. Then you've got 4 super thick strings stretched over a bridge. They're tuned E, A, D, and G, from lowest to highest. When a player plucks those, you get those incredibly deep notes that you feel in your chest.
And here's a little insider fact for you. While those giant 6-foot basses are out there, most jazz musicians actually play a slightly smaller version called a 3/4 bass. It's still massive, around 71 inches, but it's just a bit more manageable, and that little bit of difference helps them play faster and get around the instrument with more agility.
All right, so we know what it's made of. Now for the really fun part. Section 3, the sound of swing, plucks and walks. Let's talk about how bassists actually create that signature jazz sound. It really boils down to a couple of key techniques. First up is a technique called pizzicato. It sounds fancy, but it's just an Italian word that means plucked. So instead of using a bow like you often see in a classical orchestra, jazz bassists almost always use their fingers to pluck the strings. This creates a sharp, punchy, almost drum-like sound that's absolutely perfect for rhythm.
And that pluck is everything. It's not just a note, it's the actual pulse of the entire band. That sharp attack followed by a warm, round tone, that's what the drummer locks into. It's what gives the music its forward drive. You could say the pluck is the pulse.
And this brings us to probably the most iconic thing a jazz bassist does, the walking bass line. If you want to know what it sounds like, just imagine someone walking at a steady, confident pace. That's it. The bassist plays one note on every single beat. Boom, 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 walking through the song's chords. It creates this incredible feeling of constant forward motion.
You can really think of the walking bass line as the musical glue holding the whole band together. Seriously, it bridges the gap between the drummer's rhythm and the piano's harmony, and it gives the soloists a solid foundation to build their ideas on. Without that steady walk, the music could easily just fall apart.
Okay, section 4, pioneers of the pulse, the legends of the low end. An instrument is only as good as the people who play it, and there have been some incredible musicians who showed the world what the double bass was capable of. First up, you have to talk about Jimmy Blanton. Before he came along in the early 1940s, the bass was pretty much just a timekeeper in the background. But Blanton, he completely changed the game. He stepped into the spotlight and proved the bass could be a powerful, exciting solo instrument, just like a trumpet or a saxophone.
Then there's the great Ray Brown. I mean, this guy is the definition of swing. His bass lines were so powerful, his rhythm was flawless, and he had this uncanny ability to pick the absolute perfect note every single time. He just made every band he ever played in sound better.
And you absolutely cannot talk about jazz bass without mentioning Charles Mingus. He was a true force of nature. Not only was he a technical genius on the instrument, he was also one of jazz's most important composers and band leaders. He used the bass to direct his bands, creating some of the most passionate and intense music ever recorded.
So let's jump to today. With all the changes in music and technology, where does the double bass stand? Well, it's still right at the center of the action, holding things down. But this brings up a really good question. The double bass is an acoustic instrument, right? So how on earth do you hear its deep, subtle notes over a loud drummer and blaring horns in a modern club? The answer is a little bit of clever technology. Bassists will attach a small device called a pickup to the bridge of the bass. The pickup captures the string vibrations and sends that signal to an amplifier. But here's the key. The goal isn't just to be loud. The goal is to amplify the sound just enough to be heard, while keeping that rich, deep, natural, woody tone that makes the instrument so special in the first place. And that right there is why, even though the electric bass was invented and is used in all kinds of music, the classic acoustic double bass is still the #1 choice for most jazz musicians. There's just no substitute for that organic, resonant sound that feels like it's coming right out of the wood itself. So from the streets of New Orleans to the concert halls of today, the double bass has been the constant anchor of jazz. It sets the time, it outlines the harmony, and it provides the soulful foundation for everything else. So the next time you're listening to jazz, just close your eyes for a second and focus on that deep, walking pulse. It kind of makes you wonder, what will the next generation of players do to change its sound?